There's a name for God you have almost certainly said out loud. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. It's on wall art, it's in worship songs, it's in the prayer somebody prays when the money doesn't reach the end of the month. If you grew up anywhere near a church, you learned it as one of the names of God, one of the things God says about himself. It comes from one verse, Genesis chapter 22, verse 14. And I want to read it to you the way it actually sits on the page, word by word, in the order the Hebrew puts them. And called Abraham, the name of place, that Yahweh, Jireh. Read it again, slowly. The name of that place. Abraham didn't name God, he named a mountain. The most famous name of God in the English-speaking church is, in the verse that produces it, a label somebody hammered into a hillside. It's a postcode. It's the ancient equivalent of a brass plate on a bench. And once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. Because go through the famous list, the names on the poster, the ones in the chart at the back of the study Bible, and a lot of them are doing exactly this. They're not names God gave. They're markers people left. But here's what stopped me. Somewhere in that list, there's exactly one verse where that same verb points at God himself. Not at a place, at him. 1. And the person who said it had no right to say anything at all. She left something else with a name on it too. It's still on the map. You could go and look for it. Hold on to that. We're coming back to it, and it's the reason I made this. The list gets taught as a self-portrait, a row of names, each one a thing God says about who he is. Line them up, and you're supposed to be looking at God's own description of himself, in his own words, handed down. But if most of the list is actually people, planting markers in the dirt to remember what happened to them there, then the list is telling a different story than the one it gets used for. Not a smaller story, a stranger one. And it's worth knowing now who that story turns out to be about. The list, the way it's usually taught, is a list of what God did for the people withstanding. Abraham, Moses, Gideon, David, Ezekiel, patriarchs, prophets, kings, the men whose names end up on the buildings. If you've ever sat in a room and known, without anybody being rude about it, that you were the one person there whose opinion wasn't going to be asked for, hold on to that feeling. It's not a footnote to this. It turns out to be the subject. The list is 3 different things wearing one label. Some of it is ancient titles built on the word El. Some of it is markers human beings planted to remember what happened somewhere. And some of it, a smaller amount than you'd think, is God opening his mouth and saying who he is. And exactly once in the whole Hebrew Bible, a human being looks at God and gives him a name. And the other half of that, right now, at the front, because if I hide it, you should stop trusting me. This is not a debunk. Some of that list is exactly what you were told it was. God does name himself more than once, and those moments aren't decorations. They're the spine of the thing. The problem isn't that the list is fake. The problem is that the list is mixed, and nobody sorted it. So here's the tool. It'll let you check me instead of trusting me. There's one Hebrew verb underneath every one of these verses. Qara. Say it qara. It means to call out, to name. Same verb every time. Genesis, Exodus, Judges, Ezekiel. It never changes. What changes is what it's pointing at. That's it. Watch the object. Start where we started. Genesis 22, verse 14. Abraham has just come down off the worst morning of his life. He's been told to kill his son. He's gone as far as the raised knife. And then a voice stops him, and there's a ram caught in a thicket, and he offers that instead. And then he names something, and called Abraham the name of place, that Yahweh, Jireh. The object is makom. Makom is the ordinary Hebrew word for place, a spot, a location where something is. Abraham took the worst morning of his life and bolted a name onto the ground where it happened. That's not nothing. That's one of the most human things in the book. But it isn't a name for God. It's a name for a hill. Now hold that shape in your head because it's about to happen again. Exodus chapter 17, verse 15. Israel has just fought Amalek. Moses has been up on the hill with his arms held up by two other men. And when it's over, here's the Hebrew, word by word. And built, Moses, an altar, and called its name, Yahweh, Nissi. Mizbeach, say it Mizbeach, altar, third word in the verse. And look at the fifth word, its name, its, the altars. Moses stacked some stones with his own hands. Then he named the stones. Third time. And this one has a detail in it that I'd never noticed until this year. Judges chapter 6, verse 24. Gideon's been hiding in a winepress, threshing wheat in a hole in the ground because there's an army in the country and he's frightened of it. And an angel has just called him a mighty man of valor, which, given where he's standing, is almost funny. And Gideon builds something. Here's the Hebrew. And built, there, Gideon, an altar, to Yahweh. And he called it Yahweh Shalom. Now watch. This is doing two things in one sentence. The altar is built to Yahweh. The Hebrew is La Yahweh, for him. It belongs to him. And then the name lands on the altar. The word is lo, it. He called it Yahweh Shalom. One verse, two different things, the God it's for and the object that gets the name. The verse itself keeps them apart. We're the ones who ran them together. Fourth, and this one's quick because by now you know the shape. Ezekiel chapter 48, verse 35. Ezekiel's in Babylon. He's in exile. He has watched in a vision the glory of God get up and leave the temple. Everything that was supposed to be permanent is ash. And the very last thing he writes, the final word of his entire book, is a name. It's the name of a city, Yahweh Shammah. The Lord is there. Shammah comes from Sham, which just means there. A man who watched God leave ends his life's work by naming a city that doesn't exist yet. Think about the nerve of that. He's in Babylon. The temple is rubble. He is never going home. And the last thing he does with his prophetic life is put a name on a city he will not live to see. And the name he picks means, the Lord is there. That's magnificent. It's also, again, a place. And this is where I have to stop and hand you the other side, because you're about to think I'm building something I'm not. Not all of them. Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. Israel's at a bitter pool called Marah, and God speaks in the first person about himself. Some translations render the end of it, I am the Lord, your healer, Yahweh Rapha. Nobody planted that. Nobody built anything. God said it about himself out loud. Genesis chapter 17, verse 1. God appears to Abram and says, I am El Shaddai. Same thing. That's not a marker. That's a self-introduction. So the claim isn't that the list is fake. Half of it is exactly what you were told it was. The claim is that the list is mixed. There are two completely different kinds of thing on it. They got filed under one heading. And once they're under one heading, you stop being able to tell which is which. And here's what I love about this. The name God actually does give himself, El Shaddai, the one out of his own mouth, is the one nobody can translate. You've probably been told it means God Almighty, and that's how your Bible prints it. But the Hebrew, Shaddai, is genuinely unsettled. There are at least three live candidates. 1. Mountain. From an Akkadian word, Shadu, meaning mountain, God of the mountain. This is the most widely accepted option, and the main objection to it is that there's no direct Hebrew cognate for mountain to back it up. 2. Breast. From the Hebrew word shad, the one of the breast, a God who nourishes out of himself. And there's real evidence for this one. Over in Genesis 49, verse 25, there's an apparent wordplay between Shaddai and Shaddayim, which is the Hebrew for breasts. That's not nothing. 3. Destroyer. From the verb shaddad, to destroy. Mountain, breast, destroyer. Scholarship draws no firm conclusion. The etymology still hasn't been cleared up. Sit with that for a second. Because you may have heard the second one taught warmly and confidently, the nursing God, the God who is enough. It's a beautiful reading. It might even be right. It's just not settled, and the most widely accepted answer is actually the mountain. The honest answer is that nobody knows, and I think the honest answer is stranger and better than any of the three. The one name God hands us about himself is a name we can't fully read. Now look at the front of half these names. El Shaddai, El Elyon, El Roy, El. You've been told El just means God, and it does. But in the late Bronze Age, El was also something else. El was the proper name of the high god of the Canaanite pantheon, the patriarch, the old one at the top. And here's how we know. It's because of a plow. Spring 1928, Ras Shamra, on the Mediterranean coast of what's now Syria, about 8 miles north of Latakia. A Syrian farmer is plowing, and his blade hits something that isn't rock. It's the corbelled roof of a late Bronze Age tomb. The following year, 1929, a French expedition under Claude Schaeffer starts digging. It runs for decades. And out of the ground come thousands of clay tablets, written in a cuneiform script nobody had ever seen before. Underneath was the city of Ugarit, destroyed somewhere around 1185 BC. And on those tablets is a whole world. El, the patriarchal high god, the old one at the top. Baal, the storm rider. Anat, his sister. Asherah, Yam, who is the sea. Mot, who is death. These aren't concepts, they're characters. They argue, they hold councils, they have houses and tempers and relatives. Here's the part that gets me. Until 1929, we knew that pantheon only through the Bible's arguments against it. Think about what that means for a second. From the fall of that city until that plow, everything anybody knew about the gods of Canaan came from the people who were against them. It's a fight where one side kept the transcript, and then a farmer hit a tomb, and the other side got to speak for itself, in its own language, in its own words, about its own gods, for the first time since the Bronze Age ended, and the god at the top of it was called El. Now, careful. This is exactly the kind of thing that gets flattened into the Bible, just copied pagan myths. And that's not what's happening, and I'm not going to let it turn into that. What's true here is narrow, and it's real. The name is shared. Some of the epithets are shared. In the Ugaritic texts, El is clearly the supreme god of that pantheon, and he's got genuine similarities to Israel's patriarchal god. What that shared name means, dependence, or inheritance, or a deliberate takeover of somebody else's vocabulary, is an argument I'm not qualified to settle, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But you should know the ground is there, because most of what gets made about these names walks straight over it, and it's the most interesting dirt in the field. So, look at what we've got. A mountain, 2 altars, a city. Psalm 23's "The Lord is my shepherd," which is a simile in a poem, not a name anybody assigned. David isn't naming God there. He's reaching for the closest thing in his own working life and saying, it's like that. It's the same move as saying, my father was a rock. Nobody thinks that's a name. And Jeremiah 23's "The Lord our righteousness," which might be the strangest one on the whole list. Because read the verse slowly. Jeremiah is promising a king who's coming, and then he says, this is the name by which he will be called. He, the king. It's on the list of the names of God, and in the verse that produces it, it's a throne name for somebody else. And then 2 places where God does open his mouth and say who he is, one of which is a word we still can't translate, which leaves the question that's been sitting underneath this the whole time. In all of that, has anybody actually named God? If this is the kind of thing you want more of, subscribe. This is what every video here does. One word, followed all the way down to wherever it actually goes. Now we can go to the burning bush. Exodus 3. The bush is on fire and isn't burning up, and Moses asks God a question. He asks for the name, and here's what he gets back. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. In English, your Bible probably says, I am who I am, and that's a defensible rendering. But look at the grammar, because it's doing something English can't hold. Ehyeh is a first-person imperfect of the verb hayah, to be. Imperfect, in Hebrew, isn't past tense and isn't present tense. It's the tense for action that isn't finished. Ongoing, incomplete, still happening. And the phrase doubles itself. Ehyeh asher ehyeh. Grammarians call that an idiom per idiom construction. The same thing, defined by the same thing. Which is why the footnote in a lot of Bibles doesn't say, I am who I am. It says, I will be what I will be. Moses asked for a name. He got a verb that hasn't finished happening. And what happens to that verb next is the most interesting thing in this whole subject, and almost nobody tells you about it. The Septuagint is the oldest translation of the Hebrew Bible we have. The Hebrew turned into Greek a couple of centuries before Christ. And when the Septuagint gets to Exodus 3:14, it renders it, Ego eimi hoon. I am the one who is. That's a huge move, because hoon isn't a verb that hasn't finished. Hoon is being existence, absolute existence. That's Greek philosophy's language, and it's magnificent, and it's where every single thing you've ever heard about God being the ground of all being, existence itself, the one who simply is, that's where all of it comes from. Not from the Hebrew, from that Greek line. Sit with that for a second. The most familiar theological reading of the most famous verse in this entire subject arrives through a translation choice. And here's the part that finished me. Early in the 2nd century after Christ, 2 Jewish translators, Aquila and Theodotion, went back to Exodus 3:14 and rendered it differently. They wrote, Esomai hos esomai, I will be who I will be. Future, unfinished, doubled the way the Hebrew doubles. Apparently, they were trying to produce something truer to the Hebrew than the Septuagint had been. They put the idem per idem back. I want to be careful here. I can't read their minds, and the source I'm working from hedges their motive, and so will I. But the fact itself is just sitting there in the record. Ancient Jewish scholars looked at I am the one who is, and translated their way back out of it. The Septuagint isn't wrong. I want to say that plainly. It's a choice. It's the oldest choice we've got, and it's a serious one. But it is a choice, and somebody at the time chose differently. Now put all of that together, because there's a pattern here, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Moses asks for the name. He gets a verb in an unfinished tense. Genesis 32. Jacob has wrestled all night with someone by a river, and at the end of it, he asks the man his name. And he doesn't get it. He gets a question back, something like, "Why is it that you're asking me that?" And then the man blesses him. Blessed, not told. Judges 13. Manoah, who's about to be Samson's father, meets the angel of the Lord and asks the same thing. "Tell me your name." And he gets the same move, a question back. Different words depending which English Bible you're holding, but the same shape. "Why are you asking my name?" 3 men, 3 of the most significant men in the book. All 3 ask. None of them get a name. Except once. Genesis chapter 16, verse 13. Same verb, qara, to call, to name. And this time the object isn't a place. It isn't an altar. It isn't a city. It's Shem Yahweh, the name of the Lord, Him. Somebody looked at God and named Him, and the Hebrew grammar just lets it happen. And the name is El Roi. Say it. E-L-L-Roi. El, God. Roi, from the verb to see, the God who sees me. And the second half of that verse, literally, word for word, is, I have seen after him who sees me. Both directions. She's seen, and she saw. The Hebrew doesn't make you pick. Neither will I. Both are in there. And now go back 2 verses, because Genesis 16 has been doing this the whole time, and I walked past it for years. Verse 11. Before she says anything at all, the angel tells her what to call her son. Ishmael, Yishmael, God hears. And the reason given isn't a general one. It's not that God hears in principle, or that God hears the righteous, or that God hears prayer. The text says He's heard her affliction. This specific woman in this specific wilderness with this specific misery. So hold the 2 halves of that chapter next to each other. God hears her and tells her to put that in her son's name. Every time she says her boy's name for the rest of her life, she'll be saying, God heard me. She sees him and puts that in his. 1 scene, 2 directions. He listens and she looks, and both of them end up as names. And then count how many namings are actually happening in this one chapter. She names her son, but she was told to. That one was assigned, she's carrying it out. She names the well, that's the ordinary thing. Everybody does that one. And in between, she names God. And nobody told her to. Nobody assigned it. There's no instruction. There's no permission. No angel turns up to tell her what he's called. 3 namings in one chapter from one person. 2 of them were handed to her. The third one she just did. And now the part that reframes everything before it. Who said it? Not a patriarch, not a prophet, not a king. Hagar, an Egyptian slave woman, pregnant, on the run, sitting by a spring in a wilderness because the alternative was staying where she was being hurt. No legal standing, no property, not inside the covenant. She isn't even part of the family the promises were made to. She's the household's property, and she's running, and she's got no plan because there isn't a plan available to somebody in her position. She is the person in the room whose opinion is not going to be asked for. And she is the only person in the Hebrew Bible who gives God a name. Now here's why that lands the way it does. Gerhard von Rad pointed out something about the ancient world that changes the shape of the whole thing. Name-giving in the ancient Near East was primarily an exercise of sovereignty, of command. It's what a superior does to an inferior. You name your children, you name your animals, you name your slaves. It runs downhill, always. From the one with power to the one without. Which means what Hagar does here isn't a nice moment. It's an inversion of the entire social order. Jacob couldn't do this. Moses couldn't do this. Manoah couldn't do this. Every one of them asked from a position of standing and got a question back. The Egyptian slave girl doesn't ask. She names him. And nothing happens. No correction, no lightning. The narrator just writes it down. Now, the name itself is hard, and I'd be doing exactly what I've spent half an hour complaining about if I pretended otherwise. Genesis 16:13 is compact Hebrew, and the commentators genuinely differ. Rashi reads it as God of sight. Joseph ben Isaac Bekor Shor reads it as God saw me. Others land on God who appears, or all-seeing God, and your English Bibles scatter accordingly. The ESV has, you are a God of seeing. The NIV and the NLT have, you are the God who sees me. The King James has, thou God seest me. Some just give up and leave El Roy sitting there untranslated. So I can't hand you one clean rendering. Nobody can. But notice what doesn't move. Whichever one of those is right, the object of the verb is still him. The grammar isn't waiting on the translation committee. Whatever exactly she called him, she called him. So come back to the thing I asked you to hold at the start. The room where nobody's going to ask your opinion. You know the one. Maybe it's a family. Maybe it's a workplace or a church, and everybody's perfectly polite about it. And that's almost the worst part. Nobody's cruel. Nobody excludes you on purpose. It's just that when the real conversation starts, it starts somewhere you aren't. You're in the room. You're not in the room. And the quiet thing that does to you, over years, is it teaches you that access runs on credentials. That the people who get heard are the people who've earned the right to be heard. And that if you haven't earned it, the honest thing to do is wait. Now look at what actually happened in this story. The 3 men with every right to a name asked for one. Properly, from a position of standing. Jacob had just wrestled the man all night. Moses was on assignment. Manoah was about to father a judge of Israel. All 3 asked. None of them got it. And the woman with no right to anything at all, no covenant, no property, no household, no legal standing to name so much as a goat, didn't ask. She just looked at him and said what he was. And that's the name the text kept. Standing was never the mechanism. It never was. The people with standing, in this story, are the ones left holding the plaques. Here's the picture I can't get out of my head. You know the little brass plaques on park benches? Somebody died. Somebody who loved them paid for a bench, and a small brass plate got screwed onto the slats. In loving memory of. And then a name and 2 dates, and if there's room, a line about how much they liked this view. I read them. I think most people read them. And here's the thing about a plaque. Every plaque names the bench. That's what it does. It's fixed to the wood. It's telling you something happened here. Someone sat here. Someone is gone. Read 100 of them and you'll learn an enormous amount about grief and about love and about the specific ache of a particular view of a particular river. And you will not learn one single thing about the person who died. Not what their voice did when they were about to laugh. Not what they were like to sit next to. Not whether they were kind at 3 in the morning, which is the only hour that really tells you. The bench knows none of it. The bench just knows it was there. The plaque is true. The plaque is not the person. That's Moriah. That's the altar after Amalek. That's the altar in the winepress. 3 men who went through the worst hour of their lives came out the other side and did the only thing a human being can think to do. They bolted a plate to the place where it happened. Something happened here. He provided. He was my banner. He is peace. All of it true. None of it his name. And then there's a woman by a spring who owns nothing. She's got no bench. She's got nothing to screw a plate into. She's not going to be building an altar because she has no stones, no household, no standing, and no reason to think anyone would ever read it. So she doesn't leave a plaque. She turns around and says a name to the face in front of her. Here's what stays with me. It's that nobody in the text says anything about it. There's no correction. There's no aside explaining that this was permitted as a one-off. There's no verse where somebody more important comes along and redoes it properly. There's no note in the margin saying she shouldn't have. The only person in the Hebrew Bible who ever named God did it without asking anyone's permission. And heaven's entire response was to keep the name. And she names one more thing. Remember, at the start, I told you she left something on the map. Genesis 16, verse 14. She names the well, Bir Lahai Roy. The text glosses it, the well of the living one who sees me. And it says it sits between Kadesh and Bered. We're not completely sure where Bered was. It doesn't turn up anywhere else, so don't let anybody put a pin in it for you. But look at what she just did. She built the place name out of the God name. She did both. She did the ordinary thing, the thing Abraham did, the thing Moses did, the thing Gideon did. She left a marker in the ground. She screwed the plate to the bench. And she also did the thing not one of them managed. The patriarchs only ever got one of the two. She got both, in the same afternoon. Pregnant, homeless, with no legal right to name a goat. There's a well in the wilderness named after a name that a slave gave to God. Not a mountain where a patriarch was tested. Not an altar where an army won. A well. The most ordinary object in the ancient world. The thing you need every single day. The thing you can't live a week without. She put it on the map. And the map kept it. So here's the list, the real one. The name that was a mountain. The name that was an altar Moses stacked out of loose stones after a battle he watched from a hill. The name that was an altar in a winepress built by a man who was hiding. The name that was a city an exile could only see with his eyes shut. The name the Septuagint turned into philosophy, and 2 Jewish translators quietly turned back. The name Jacob asked for all night and did not get. The name Manoah asked for and did not get. The name Moses asked for and got a verb instead. And the one name a human being ever gave him. From a pregnant runaway with nothing. No standing, no property, no covenant, no plan. El Roy, the God who sees me. If that's what you want more of, subscribe. One word, all the way down, wherever it actually goes. And here's where I'll leave you. The God at the end of this list isn't the one who waits to be addressed correctly. He isn't standing behind a desk checking whether you've got the standing to file the paperwork. Every single person in this story who had the credentials asked, properly, from a position of authority, and went away without an answer. The one who got the name was the one who had no business having it. She didn't ask what to call him. She looked at him and told him what he was, and he let it stand, and it's still standing with a well underneath it. You are seen by the God a slave girl named, and he kept her word for it.